Let us explore a peculiar truth together. In our modern world, we value articulation above all else. We celebrate the person who can explain complex ideas, who can break down and define the intricate workings of our reality. And there is certainly value in this skill. But here's the thing. The most essential aspects of our existence actually resist explanation. They collapse the moment we try to pin them down with language. You see, explanation has become our religion. We believe if we can explain something clearly enough, we can control it, own it, pass it on to others. We have an almost compulsive need to explain ourselves, our experiences, our insights. But what if I told you that this very habit is robbing you of your most precious treasures? When we attempt to explain certain realities, we do not merely fail at the task. We actually diminish the very thing we are trying to communicate. It's like trying to capture water with a clenched fist. The tighter you grip, the less water remains. Think about it. Have you ever had a profound realization, a moment of clarity that felt like the universe opening up to you? And then when someone asked you about it, the moment you started to explain, you felt that clarity slipping away, becoming smaller, more ordinary with each word. Let me tell you about a man I knew. He spent over 30 years writing books about enlightenment. Thick volumes filled with explanations, metaphors, stories, all attempting to convey the nature of awakening. One evening, over a simple cup of tea, he confessed to me that the more he wrote, the further from truth he felt. The more precisely he tried to articulate his understanding, the more it seemed to retreat from him. And in that moment of confession, there was more genuine transmission of wisdom than in all his published works combined. Now, I am not saying we should never speak of important things, but there are three fundamental realities that, when we attempt to explain them to others, we don't merely fail. We actually distort and degrade their essence. The first is the nature of your deepest self. Not the self that has a name, a history, a set of preferences. Not the self that can be described on a resume or a dating profile. But the self beneath all that. The awareness that persists through all your changing states. Have you ever noticed how the moment you try to explain who you truly are, you find yourself reduced to social roles and descriptions that miss the essence completely? The second reality that dissolves upon explanation is genuine spiritual awakening. Those moments when the veil of ordinary perception falls away and you glimpse the world as it truly is, not as you have been taught to see it. The moment you begin to put words to these experiences, you find yourself using cliches and approximations that make the experience sound exactly like everyone else's description, when in fact, it was utterly unique and defied all conventional categories. And the third, inexplicable reality is the feeling of profound love. Not the idea of love, not the behaviors associated with love, but the actual lived experience of deep connection. The moment you try to explain why you love someone, you find yourself listing qualities and traits that could never add up to the totality of what you feel. But here's the curious thing about these three inexplicable realities. The impulse to explain them is nearly irresistible. We feel that if we can just find the right words, the perfect metaphor, we can make others understand. We can preserve the experience. We can own it more fully. What if I told you that this impulse itself is part of the problem? What if the very desire to explain these things is what keeps us from fully inhabiting them? You see, explanation is a tool of the thinking mind. And the thinking mind, valuable as it is not equipped to comprehend these deeper realities. It's like trying to use a thermometer to measure weight. The instrument simply isn't designed for the task. When you feel compelled to explain these three realities, consider what you're actually trying to accomplish. Are you trying to help the other person? Or are you trying to validate your own experience? Are you trying to connect? Or are you trying to impress? These are questions worth asking before you begin to speak. The paradox is that in our culture of endless explanation, the truly wise person might be the one who knows when to remain silent. Not out of secrecy or elitism, but out of respect for the ineffable nature of the most profound aspects of our existence. Think of it this way. If you were standing before the Grand Canyon for the first time, watching the play of light and shadow across its vast expanse, would you immediately pull out your phone and start texting descriptions to friends? Or would you simply stand in awe, allowing the experience to wash over you completely? The things most worth knowing might be precisely those things that cannot be told. They must be discovered, experienced, lived, and in our rush to explain, we often prevent both ourselves and others from having the direct experience that no explanation could ever replicate. Now, let's look at the first thing you should never explain to anyone, and that is the nature of your deepest self. Not your personality, not your history, not your collection of preferences and aversions, but the essence of who you really are, beneath all those temporary accumulations. You see, the moment you begin to explain your true self, you immediately fall into a trap. You begin to list attributes and qualities. I am kind. I am intelligent. I am creative. I am a doctor, a mother, a writer, an American. But none of these descriptions touch the essence of what you are. They are merely costumes draped over your fundamental nature. They change while something unchanging continues to witness them all. The self that you truly are is like the eye attempting to see itself. No matter how quickly you turn, you cannot catch a glimpse of your own seeing. No matter how hard you try, you cannot bite your own teeth. The real you is not an object that can be pointed to, defined, or explained. It is the subject that does all the pointing, defining, and explaining. Society has trained us well in the art of self-definition. Fill out this form, write this resume, create this dating profile. Tell us who you are in 3 sentences or less. And we learn to reduce ourselves to a set of marketable qualities. I am productive. I am efficient. I am creative, but also detail-oriented. But here's the thing. These are just strategies for navigation. They are not you. Whenever someone asks you to explain yourself, they are asking for something impossible. It's like asking the sky to fit itself into a box, or asking the ocean to pour itself into a cup. You might give them a cupful, but that is not the ocean. It is merely a sample, and a poor one at that. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly understood by someone's explanation of themselves? When was the last time you read a biography and thought, yes, now I truly know what it is like to be that person? We can learn facts about people. We can recognize patterns in their behavior, but we never truly know them through explanation. Let me tell you something. I once met a Zen master who was asked by an earnest student to explain his true nature. The master remained silent for a long time. The student persisted, thinking perhaps the master hadn't heard him. Finally, the master picked up his cup, drank his tea, and set the cup back down. That was his entire answer. And strangely enough, it was more illuminating than any verbal explanation could have been. He was saying, in essence, this is who I am. This moment. This action. This presence. You might ask yourself, but if I don't explain myself, how will others know me? What if I told you that true understanding comes not through explanation, but through presence? People come to know the real you not by what you tell them, but by how you move through the world, how you respond to its challenges and opportunities, how you treat others when nothing can be gained or lost. When you feel the urge to explain your deepest self, pause. Ask yourself what you're truly seeking in that moment. Validation? Connection? Understanding? These are legitimate human needs, but explanation is rarely the best way to fulfill them. I am not saying you should be mysterious or withholding. I am saying that the richest knowing happens in the realm of direct experience, not in the realm of concepts and language. When you let go of the need to explain yourself, something remarkable happens. You create space for genuine connection. You allow yourself to be known rather than merely described. The absurdity of self-explanation becomes apparent when you consider how fluid and changing you actually are. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. You are not even the same person you were yesterday. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced. Your thoughts and feelings shift from moment to moment. Your beliefs evolve over time. Which version of you would you explain, and to what end? The deeper truth is that the self is not a static entity, but a flowing process. It is more like a river than a rock. You cannot step into the same river twice, as the ancient saying goes, because it is never the same river, and you are never the same person. When we grasp this, we begin to see the humor in our desperate attempts to define ourselves. We spend decades constructing an identity, refining it, polishing it, only to discover that what we truly are was present from the beginning, requiring no construction or refinement at all. What we truly are is the awareness in which all these changing phenomena appear, and awareness cannot be packaged or explained. It can only be experienced directly. So instead of explaining yourself, simply be yourself. Allow your actions to speak. Allow your presence to communicate. Allow your being to touch others without the intermediary of concepts and explanations. This is not only more authentic, it is more effective. It is how human beings truly come to know one another. The ego loves explanation because the ego is itself a kind of explanation, a story we tell to make sense of the ineffable mystery of consciousness. But you are not that story. You are the storyteller. Or more accurately, you are the awareness in which both story and storyteller appear. When someone asks you who you really are, the truest answer might be silence. Not a cold or withholding silence, but a warm, inviting silence that says, "Come and see. Spend time with me. Pay attention." The answer will reveal itself in each moment we share. The moment you truly understand yourself is precisely the moment you realize there is nothing to explain. The question dissolves along with the questioner, and what remains is simply what has always been here. The pure awareness that is reading these words right now, that has been present for every moment of your life, unchanged amidst all the changes, unconditioned amidst all the conditioning, free even when you believe yourself to be bound. The second reality that dissolves upon explanation is the genuine spiritual awakening experience. Those moments when ordinary consciousness falls away, and you glimpse something so vast, so profound, that it shatters your previous understanding of reality. Perhaps it came during meditation, or while walking in nature, or in the midst of great suffering. Suddenly the veil parted, and you saw through the conventional world into something timeless and infinite. And then what happens? They will ask. They will ask. They will ask. What was it like? What did you see? What did you learn? And the moment you begin to answer, you feel the experience shrinking, becoming smaller with each word, until it sounds like just another story, just another concept, just another idea. But it was never an idea. It was a direct perception that transcended the thinking mind entirely. And when you try to bring it back into the realm of thought, you inevitably distort it beyond recognition. It's like trying to describe a symphony to someone who has never heard music, or explaining color to someone who has been blind from birth. The words exist, but they cannot bridge the gap between knowing and not knowing. Think about it. The very nature of spiritual awakening is that it transcends the dualistic mind, the mind that operates in terms of subject and object, knower and known. It reveals a level of reality where these distinctions dissolve. But language itself is inherently dualistic. It requires a speaker and a listener, a subject and a predicate. So the moment you try to explain your awakening, you force it back into the very dualistic framework that it transcended. I once knew someone who spent 3 hours describing their mystical experience to me, with great eloquence and detail. And at the end, they sighed deeply and said, "But you know, none of what I've said comes close to what actually happened. All these words, and I feel like I've told you nothing at all." That is precisely the point. The transformative power of spiritual insight lies in its ability to take you beyond the conceptual mind. And the conceptual mind is where all explanation takes place. So by trying to explain it, you are trying to fit something infinite into a finite container, something boundless into a bounded form. It will never work. Not because you lack skill with words, but because words themselves are inadequate to the task. This does not mean that spiritual experiences are somehow supernatural or magical. It means they operate at a level of consciousness that our explanatory faculties cannot access. They show rather than tell. They reveal rather than describe. They transform rather than inform. So what should you do when you have such an experience? Let it work on you in silence. Let it change you from the inside out. Let your life become its expression, not your words. The true evidence of spiritual awakening is not in how well you can explain it, but in how you live each moment afterward, in your presence, not your explanations. And if someone asks you what happened, what you experienced, what you saw, you might simply smile and say, "Come and see for yourself. The door is always open, the path is always there, but I cannot walk it for you, and I cannot show you what lies at its end. I can only point the way and encourage you to discover it directly." Let's move to the third inexplicable reality, which is perhaps the most commonly explained and therefore the most commonly diminished. I'm talking about profound love. Not the superficial attraction that passes for love in our culture. Not the sentimental version of love portrayed in our media, but the deep, boundless connection that transforms your entire being. But here's the thing about love. The moment you try to explain why you love someone, you reduce an infinite reality to a finite list. You make small what is actually vast. Think about it. When asked why you love someone, you might say, "Because they're kind, because they're intelligent, because they make me laugh." But these are qualities that many people possess. If these qualities were truly the basis of your love, you would love all kind, intelligent, funny people equally. But you don't. There is something more mysterious at work. I'm not saying that qualities don't matter. I'm saying that the essence of love transcends qualities. It's like trying to explain why a particular piece of music moves you to tears while another leaves you cold. You can talk about the arrangement, the melody, the harmony, but none of that captures the actual experience of being moved. Love is not a thought. It's not an emotion. It's not a choice. It's a recognition. A recognition of something that was always there but not always seen. It's like suddenly perceiving the depth in a painting that previously looked flat. Nothing in the painting has changed, but everything about your perception has. And when you try to explain this recognition, you inevitably fall back on cliches and approximations that make your unique experience sound generic. You say things like, "When I'm with them, time stands still," or "They complete me," or "I can't imagine life without them." All of which may be true, but none of which communicates the actual lived experience of your love. There is something almost sacred about the privacy of profound love. It exists in a space between you and the beloved that no one else can enter. And perhaps that's as it should be. Perhaps some experiences are meant to be sheltered from the harsh light of explanation, allowed to flourish in the gentle darkness of direct knowing. I think of a couple I once knew who had been together for over 60 years. Someone asked them the secret to their long marriage, expecting some words of wisdom. The husband looked at his wife with eyes full of a lifetime of knowing. She looked back at him. They both smiled. Then he turned to the questioner and said simply, "There is no secret," which was both completely true and completely inadequate. Their love was not a method to be explained, but a mystery to be lived. Consider this. When you're with someone you truly love, in moments of deepest connection, do you feel the need to explain anything? Or is there a wordless knowing, a silent communion that needs no commentary? It's often in our most profound moments that language falls away entirely, and we dwell in pure presence with one another. So the next time you feel compelled to explain your love to someone, pause. Ask yourself whether your words will illuminate or diminish the reality they attempt to describe. Consider whether silence might be a more perfect expression. Not a withholding silence, but a silence full of meaning. A silence that honors the ineffable nature of what you feel. What I'm suggesting requires a kind of trust. Trust that what is real does not need to be explained to be real. Trust that what is true does not need to be defended to be true. Trust that what is profound will communicate itself in ways beyond words, if only we have the courage to let it speak in its own language. Now, I'm not saying we should never communicate about important things. I'm not advocating for some kind of mystical silence where we never share our experiences or insights with one another. Communication is essential to human connection. Language is one of our most remarkable tools. But like any tool, it has its proper uses and its limitations. What I am suggesting is a more nuanced relationship with explanation. A recognition that for certain profound realities, direct pointing may be more effective than detailed explanation. Sometimes a question is more illuminating than an answer. Sometimes silence communicates more than speech. We often think explanation creates connection, but sometimes our silence creates the space for genuine understanding. We believe that to help others comprehend something important, we must break it down, analyze it, articulate it clearly. But for these three inexplicable realities, the opposite may be true. By not explaining them, by not reducing them to concepts, we may actually allow others to discover them more authentically. You see, there's a fundamental difference between understanding something conceptually and knowing it directly. I can explain to you in great detail how to swim. I can describe the proper arm movements, the breathing technique, the way to kick your feet. I can create diagrams and videos. But none of that will enable you to swim. For that, you must get in the water. You must have the direct experience. The same is true for understanding your deepest self, for spiritual awakening, for profound love. No explanation, no matter how eloquent or detailed, can substitute for the direct experience. In fact, too much explanation can actually interfere with that direct experience by filling your mind with preconceptions and expectations. Let me tell you something about how wisdom is traditionally transmitted in many contemplative traditions. The teacher does not simply explain the truth to the student. Instead, the teacher creates conditions where the student can discover the truth for themselves. This might involve a question that has no logical answer, a paradox that breaks the mind's usual patterns, or simply a quality of presence that somehow communicates without words. The teacher knows that any truth that is merely believed on authority or understood intellectually is not truly known. It must be realized directly to transform the student's being. And explanation, while it has its place in the process, is never the final step. The final step is always direct insight. Think of it this way. When you go to a concert, you don't want the musician to explain the music to you. You want them to play it. When you go to a restaurant, you don't want the chef to describe the meal to you. You want to taste it. Explanation is always secondary to direct experience. It can point the way, but it cannot be the destination. Remember that water in the clenched fist? Perhaps the way to share water isn't by grasping it, but by offering an open palm where it can rest briefly before returning to its source. Perhaps the way to share our deepest truths isn't by trying to capture them in explanations, but by creating open spaces where they can appear on their own. This is a profound shift in how we think about sharing wisdom. Instead of trying to give people our understanding, we focus on helping them develop their own capacity to understand. Instead of explaining our awakening, we help create conditions where awakening can happen for them. Instead of describing our love, we simply love in a way that inspires others to discover love within themselves. What if the greatest gift you can give is not explanation of these inexplicable realities, but creating the conditions where others might discover them for themselves? What if true teaching isn't about transferring knowledge, but about igniting insight? What if true connection isn't about explaining yourself to others, but about being so authentically yourself that others are inspired to be authentic too? I think of it like this. Each of us is born with the capacity for profound self-knowledge, spiritual awakening, and boundless love. These aren't foreign territories that need to be mapped out for us. They are our birthright, our natural state. What prevents us from recognizing them isn't lack of information, but layers of conditioning, conceptual thinking, and habitual patterns that obscure our direct perception. So the most helpful thing we can offer one another isn't more information to add to the pile, but rather assistance in clearing away what blocks our natural insight. Not explanations, but invitations to look and see for ourselves. Not descriptions of the path, but companionship along the way. When someone comes to you seeking understanding about these three inexplicable things, consider whether what they really need is more explanation. Perhaps what they need is your presence, your listening, your willingness to sit with them in the mystery rather than trying to resolve it. Perhaps what they need is not your answers, but your questions. Not your certainty, but your wonder. This approach requires humility. It requires acknowledging that these profound realities are not possessions that we own and can hand to others. They are living truths that each person must discover anew. Our role is not to be the expert with all the answers, but the fellow explorer who sometimes notices helpful landmarks along the way. It also requires trust. Trust in each person's innate capacity for direct knowing. Trust that what is true will reveal itself in its own time and in its own way. Trust that some things don't need to be explained to be transmitted. We are so conditioned to value explanation that this approach may seem counterintuitive, even irresponsible. Shouldn't we share what we know as clearly as possible? Shouldn't we try to help others understand? Yes, but with the recognition that true understanding of these deepest realities always transcends explanation. It emerges in the spaces between our words, in the silence that follows our speech, in the wordless recognition that passes between two people when conceptual thinking falls away. In choosing not to explain these three things, you might actually be explaining them in the only way that matters. By allowing them to remain mysterious, you honor their true nature. By refusing to reduce them to concepts, you keep them alive as living truths rather than fossilized ideas. So the next time you feel the urge to explain your deepest self, your spiritual awakening, or your profound love, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself whether explanation is really what's called for in this moment. Consider whether there might be a more direct way to communicate, a way that preserves the integrity of what you wish to share. Perhaps in that pause, you'll discover a new kind of communication, one that doesn't try to grasp water in a clenched fist, but offers it on an open palm, where both you and the other can wonder at its nature before it returns to the vast ocean from which it came.